Hello, my dear friend. Today, I am sharing my journey of how I trained my brain to think and speak in English fluently. If you are struggling with fluency, I want you to know that you are not alone. Many people, including me, have faced this challenge. But the good news is, there are ways to improve. My name is Emma Carter. I am 22 years old, and I live in New York, United States. I am a college student, and English is not my first language. I grew up speaking Spanish at home because my parents are originally from Mexico. Even though I have lived in the U.S. my whole life, I always felt nervous when speaking English, especially in public. For years, I understood English well. I could read books, watch movies, and even write essays for my classes. But when it came to speaking, I struggled. My mind would go blank, or I would translate everything from Spanish to English before speaking. This made my speech slow, and sometimes I would feel embarrassed. I wanted to speak fluently, naturally, and without overthinking. If you have ever felt like this, I completely understand. Today, I want to share the methods I used to train my brain to process English naturally. These methods changed my life, and I believe they can help you too. First, stop translating in your head. One of my biggest problems was translating from Spanish to English before speaking. It took time and made me sound unnatural. I realized that to think in English, I had to immerse myself in the language. Here's what I did: describing everything around me in English. Every day, I trained my brain by describing things in English. For example, when I woke up, I would think, I am getting out of bed. I need to brush my teeth. I will have coffee today. Instead of thinking in Spanish and then translating, I forced myself to think directly in English. Talking to myself in English, I started having small conversations with myself in English. While cooking, I would say, I'm chopping the vegetables. This smells delicious. If I didn't know a word, I would look it up and try to use it later. This habit helped my brain get used to English naturally, and over time, I noticed that I was thinking less in Spanish. 2. Expanding my vocabulary with context. Another reason I struggled with fluency was my limited vocabulary. I knew a lot of words, but didn't know how to use them in daily conversation. Instead of memorizing long vocabulary lists, I started learning words in context. For example, if I learned the word confident, I would create sentences like, I feel confident when I practice speaking English. If I heard a new phrase in a movie, I would repeat it and try to use it in real life. I also kept a vocabulary notebook where I wrote new words along with example sentences. This helped me remember and use them naturally. 3. Listening like a child learns a language. Children learn languages by listening and imitating. I decided to do the same. Instead of just studying grammar, I started focusing on listening more, watching English TV shows and movies without subtitles. At first, I watched with subtitles, but later, I turned them off and focused on understanding by listening. This helped me get used to natural pronunciation and common phrases. Listening to podcasts and audiobooks. Every day, while walking to college, I listened to English podcasts. At first, I couldn't understand everything, but I kept listening. Over time, my brain got used to English sounds, and I understood more. 4th, practicing speaking every day, listening was helpful, but I knew that to speak fluently, I had to practice speaking regularly. Speaking with friends, I asked my American friends to speak only in English with me. They corrected my mistakes, and I learned better ways to say things. Joining language exchange groups. I joined an online group where people practiced English. We talked about different topics, and this gave me confidence. Recording myself speaking, I recorded my voice while speaking about my day. Later, I listened to it and noticed my mistakes. This helped me improve pronunciation and fluency. 5. Overcoming the fear of making mistakes. One of the biggest challenges in speaking English fluently was fear. Fear of saying the wrong thing, fear of being judged. But I realized that making mistakes is part of the learning process. Whenever I made a mistake, I reminded myself, every mistake is a lesson. The more I practice, the better I will become. I also changed my mindset from, I must speak perfectly, to I must communicate. When I focused on communication instead of perfection, I felt more relaxed and confident. 6. Thinking in English naturally. After months of using these methods, I noticed something amazing. My brain had started thinking in English automatically. One day, I was texting my friend, and I realized I was writing in English without thinking in Spanish first. That was the moment I knew my brain had started processing English naturally. I was amazed at how much my life had changed since I first decided to train my brain to think in English naturally. That initial breakthrough, where I realized I no longer needed to translate every thought, became the foundation for a journey filled with both struggles and small triumphs that slowly reshaped my world. After that turning point, I began to actively seek new challenges that would stretch my abilities further. One crisp October morning on campus, I found myself signing up for an advanced public speaking course. I remember walking into the classroom with my heart pounding, uncertain yet determined to put into practice everything I had learned about embracing imperfection and letting my thoughts flow in English. I wasn't alone in my nervousness. Many of my classmates were also non-native speakers, each carrying their own hopes and insecurities. I could feel a subtle camaraderie among us, as if we were all in this together, learning not just a language, but the art of expressing our very selves. The course instructor, Mr. Wilson, was a tall, soft-spoken man with a passion for storytelling. On the very first day, he encouraged us to share our personal experiences rather than rehearsed speeches. Your story, he said with a gentle smile, is the most authentic piece of language you have. Speak from your heart, and the words will come naturally. His words resonated with me, and I found myself recalling every moment of my early struggles. The awkward self-talk in my room, the constant effort to describe everyday actions in English, the painstaking practice sessions with friends, and even with my reflection in the mirror. Soon after, I began to notice even subtle changes in my daily routine. I would wake up and, as I made my coffee in the quiet of the early morning, I would softly narrate my routine in English. I'm boiling water for my tea. I'm arranging my thoughts for the day. It became a meditative ritual that not only prepared me for the day ahead, but also cemented the habit of thinking in English. Even during long walks across the bustling campus, I found myself engaging in silent monologues, describing the scenery and the people around me, internalizing the language bit by bit. One day, as I sat in the university cafeteria, a warm, bustling space filled with the chatter of students, I was approached by Sarah, a friend I had made in the language exchange group. With genuine curiosity in her eyes, she said, "Emma, I've noticed you speak so confidently now." What's changed? I paused, savoring the moment, and replied, I learned to train my brain to process English naturally. I stopped translating everything in my head and started living in the language instead. Her smile, mixed with both surprise and admiration, felt like a quiet celebration of my progress. That conversation spurred me to further share my methods with others, and I began writing detailed posts on my blog about my experiences. As my blog began to gain traction, It opened up new avenues for me to interact with others facing similar challenges. The comments were full of encouragement and shared stories, and soon I was invited to speak at a local community center. I vividly remember the day of the workshop, standing in a modest hall filled with eager faces. I introduced myself and started explaining the practical steps I had taken, describing my surroundings in English, listening to native speakers without fear, and even recording my own voice to identify areas for improvement. I told them, "Every mistake is a lesson. The key isn't to speak perfectly, it's to speak honestly and keep moving forward." The session turned into an interactive discussion where participants shared their own tips and sometimes humorous mishaps. The energy was infectious, and I left feeling that my journey, with all its trials and errors, was now a shared experience among many. Despite these high points, there were moments when the road to fluency seemed unyielding. I recall an instance during one of my advanced language classes when the professor introduced a complex topic on American politics. The lecture was peppered with idiomatic expressions and cultural references that flew over my head. I sat there feeling overwhelmed and out of place, a knot of anxiety tightening in my chest. After class, I approached Lisa, one of my classmates, who explained the cultural nuances behind many of those expressions. That day, I learned that mastering a language wasn't just about grammar or vocabulary. It was about understanding the rich cultural context that shaped it. Although I struggled in that moment, it was also a reminder that every challenge was an opportunity to deepen my understanding. These lessons extended beyond the walls of the classroom. My journey took a transformative turn when I started volunteering at a local shelter where many newcomers faced language barriers every day. I organized informal conversation circles where participants would come together to chat, share experiences, and build their confidence in speaking English. In one such circle, I met Mr. Hernandez, a gentle soul who had moved to the United States several years ago. Over cups of warm tea in a cozy, softly lit room, he confided, "Emma, the way you speak, it's as if the language is a part of you now." His words echoed in my heart, affirming that the process of learning a language could become a bridge to understanding and empathy. The more I immersed myself in environments where English was the thread that connected us, the more natural it became to think in it. I began to understand that language is fluid. It's not just a tool for communication, but a living medium through which we share our dreams, struggles, and identities. I remember one particular evening during a storytelling event at a quaint cafe in downtown New York. The room was intimate, with soft jazz playing in the background and the low murmur of excited conversation filling the air. When it was my turn to speak, I stepped onto the small stage, and for a brief moment, I felt a familiar surge of nervousness. But then I recalled every practice session, every self-affirming mantra, and I let my story flow freely. I spoke about my childhood, the comforting voices of my parents in Spanish, and the difficult yet rewarding path to embracing English as part of who I was. The audience listened intently, and I could see the connection forming in their eyes, a silent understanding that language, in all its complexity, was something we all shared. That night, after the applause faded and the warm lights of the cafe dimmed into the night, I felt an overwhelming sense of accomplishment. I realized that my journey wasn't just about overcoming a language barrier. It was about discovering a new part of myself. I was no longer defined by the fear of mispronunciation or the anxiety of making mistakes. I was free to express my ideas, my dreams, and my true identity without the constant interference of self-doubt. As months turned into years, the secret to thinking and speaking in English fluently became more than just a set of methods. It became a philosophy of life. I embraced every opportunity to learn, whether through engaging conversations with native speakers, listening to the nuances in American radio shows, or simply observing the everyday interactions in my city. I continued to document my journey on my blog, where I shared detailed reflections on each new experience, every stumble, and every victory. I even started experimenting with creative writing in English, using short stories and personal essays as a playground for my ideas. One of the most memorable experiences was when I was invited to participate in a university debate. The topic was challenging, and the stakes felt high. I spent countless hours preparing, not just memorizing points, but also practicing the art of spontaneous thinking in English. When the day of the debate arrived, I took the stage with a mix of excitement and apprehension. The adrenaline surged as I articulated my thoughts, countered arguments, and, most importantly, communicated my genuine perspective. In that moment, I realized that every moment of uncertainty had prepared me for this very stage. When a fellow debater complimented my clarity and poise afterward, I felt a deep, affirming joy, proof that my hard work had truly paid off. Yet, it wasn't always smooth sailing. There were still days when self-doubt crept in, when a complex sentence or a tricky idiom would momentarily cloud my confidence. But with each of those challenges, I learned to pause, breathe, and remind myself of the progress I had already made. I began to view each small setback as an integral part of my journey, a necessary step in the grand process of mastering not just a language, but a new way of thinking and expressing myself. Even in the quieter moments, when I was alone in my small apartment in New York, staring out at the city lights, I would reflect on my transformation. I remembered the early days of hesitance and fear, and I marveled at how those very challenges had forged a resilience within me. I realized that fluency was not merely a skill to be acquired, but a constant evolution, a lifelong journey of self-discovery and connection. I continued to attend workshops, join discussion groups, and even mentor younger students who were just beginning their own journeys. I saw in their eyes the same flicker of hope and determination that had once driven me to push past my limits. In sharing my story and my methods, I found that teaching others deepened my own understanding of the language and its endless possibilities. Over time, my efforts began to open doors I had never imagined. I was invited to speak at regional conferences where educators and language experts gathered to share innovative ideas on teaching and learning. I participated in panel discussions where I detailed the importance of thinking directly in English rather than relying on translations. I spoke about how every interaction, whether it was a casual chat at a coffee shop or an intense debate in class, contributed to a richer, more natural command of the language. Reflecting on these experiences, I began to understand that the secret to fluency was not a fixed destination, but rather an ongoing process of embracing the language in all its facets. It was about turning everyday moments into opportunities for learning, about seeing every conversation as a chance to grow. The more I immersed myself in the language, the more it became a part of who I was, integrated into my thoughts, my dreams, and my everyday life. Today, as I look back on my journey, I see that the struggle to think and speak in English fluently was a path filled with both challenges and profound rewards. I continue to practice, to learn, and to share my experiences with anyone willing to listen. My life in the United States, with its rich cultural tapestry and endless opportunities, has taught me that language is more than just a means of communication. It is a gateway to understanding, empathy, and self-expression. I continued to marvel at how much my life had changed since I truly embraced the secret to thinking and speaking English fluently. Every day brought a new challenge, a chance to discover even more about the language, and more importantly, about myself. As my academic and professional opportunities expanded, I began to see that fluency was not simply about speaking perfectly. It was about living the language with confidence, passion, and authenticity. One summer, I landed an internship at a bustling marketing firm in downtown New York. It was a dream come true, but with it came the responsibility of presenting ideas in high-stakes meetings. I remember the first time I sat in a boardroom filled with seasoned professionals. My heart pounded, and I felt a familiar twinge of nervousness. Yet, I also remembered the countless mornings I had spent talking to myself in English, the persistent self-talk that had helped me describe every detail of my day without translation. I took a deep breath, visualized those early practice sessions, and stepped up to share my ideas. As I spoke, the words flowed naturally, and I could almost feel the language enveloping me in a warm embrace. When the meeting ended, several colleagues approached me with encouraging smiles and thoughtful questions about my approach. Their words of support filled me with a sense of pride and reaffirmed that the secret to fluency lay in embracing the language every day. Through practice, persistence, and a willingness to be vulnerable. That same summer, I was invited to a large cultural exchange event held at a community center in Manhattan. The event was a vibrant tapestry of voices, each telling stories in their native tongues, yet united by a shared love for language. I spent the evening mingling with people from various backgrounds: teachers, students, immigrants, and even lifelong language enthusiasts. One conversation with a local teacher, Alex, particularly stood out. With sincere admiration, he said, "Emma, the way you express yourself is not just fluent, it's inspiring. It's as if English has become a part of your very soul." His words resonated deeply with me and reminded me that the journey of language learning is as much about connecting with others as it is about personal growth. In the months that followed, I continued to refine my skills in every possible way. I immersed myself in American radio shows and podcasts, each broadcast teaching me new idioms, cultural nuances, and ways of thinking. I began to explore creative writing in English, using storytelling as a means to express my inner thoughts and experiences. Every sentence I wrote was a celebration of progress, a record of how far I had come from those days of constant translation in my mind. During my sophomore year at college, I was given another opportunity that would test my fluency in a completely different arena. I was selected to represent my university at a prestigious academic conference on language and cognitive development. The event took place in a historic building in downtown Manhattan, and the atmosphere was electrifying. As I walked through the corridors lined with banners celebrating intellectual achievement, I felt the weight of expectation mixed with excitement. My presentation was to be a deep dive into the very methods I had used to train my brain to process English naturally. I meticulously prepared my speech, focusing on how describing everyday routines, engaging in constant self-dialogue, and absorbing language through media had transformed my approach to communication. Standing at the podium, I looked out at the audience, a sea of eager faces, scholars, and educators, and felt a surge of adrenaline. I began by recounting the early days of my struggle, the internal battles against self-doubt, the countless hours spent practicing in front of the mirror, and the gradual realization that every mistake was a stepping stone toward improvement. I explained with heartfelt sincerity how I had learned to stop translating and instead immerse myself directly in English. I shared anecdotes of my time in language exchange groups, the workshops at the community center, and even the small moments of triumph that came from recording my own voice and hearing the natural flow of my thoughts. The room was silent as I spoke. I could sense that my story was not just my own, but a mirror reflecting the journeys of many others who had faced similar challenges. After the presentation, the conference hall buzzed with conversations. Professors and students alike approached me, asking for details about my techniques, sharing their personal struggles, and offering suggestions from their own experiences. One particular discussion with Dr. Reynolds, an expert in cognitive linguistics, led to a lively debate on how our brains adapt to new languages over time. He remarked, "Emma, your story illustrates perfectly that fluency isn't a static skill. It's an evolving process, one that blends personal experience with cognitive flexibility." His words left an indelible mark on me, reinforcing my belief that learning a language is an ongoing adventure, rich with opportunities for both personal and communal growth. Beyond the academic and professional milestones, what truly mattered was the transformation in my daily life. I found myself more present and engaged in every conversation. Whether I was strolling through Central Park or sitting in a cozy coffee shop on a chilly autumn afternoon, I would silently narrate my surroundings in English, observing the interplay of light and shadow, the hum of distant conversations, the aroma of fresh pastries. These moments became my personal meditations, reinforcing my connection to the language and nurturing a sense of calm and confidence. My newfound fluency also opened the door to mentoring others who were just beginning their journeys. I started a weekly discussion circle at the local community center, inviting fellow students and community members to share their experiences, exchange tips, and practice speaking without fear of judgment. It was a small group at first, a mix of recent immigrants, international students, and even native English speakers who had a passion for languages. We talked about everything from the simplest phrases to the most complex cultural references. In those gatherings, I learned that every person's struggle was unique, yet we all shared the same goal: to express ourselves fully and authentically. I listened intently to each story, and in the process, my own understanding of language deepened even further. Every conversation, every presentation, every moment of doubt, followed by a burst of clarity, reminded me that the journey toward fluency was not a destination, but a continuous process. The more I immersed myself in English, by living it, breathing it, and even dreaming in it, the more naturally it flowed through my thoughts and words. I began to understand that the secret wasn't about mastering every rule or memorizing an endless list of vocabulary. It was about embracing the language as a living part of my identity. Looking back, I can see that the challenges I once feared have now become milestones that chart my progress. I have come to cherish the moments of uncertainty, for they signal growth and the push toward something greater. I remember sitting alone one evening in my small New York apartment, the city lights flickering through my window, and reflecting on how each day had contributed to this remarkable transformation. I realized that language is a bridge that connects us to the world, to each other, and to the depths of our own potential. As I continue to navigate the vibrant, ever-changing landscape of the United States, I carry with me the lessons learned from every conversation, every misstep, and every triumph. I am Emma Carter, a college student who dared to challenge her fears and unlock the secret to thinking and speaking English fluently. My journey is far from over, and every day presents a new opportunity to learn, to connect, and to grow. And so, with a heart full of gratitude and eyes set on the future, I embrace the endless adventure of language, one word, one thought, one story at a time. As I continued along my journey, Every new experience deepened my connection with English and with myself. I began to see language not simply as a means to communicate, but as a living, evolving art that shaped how I viewed the world around me. Before my senior year ended, I had an epiphany. The secret to thinking in English fluently wasn't just about learning vocabulary or perfecting grammar. It was about embracing English as an integral part of my identity. I started delving into American literature and poetry, allowing the rhythm and cadence of the language to influence my thoughts. I discovered that reading aloud helped bridge the gap between written words and spontaneous speech, and soon, familiar verses began to roll off my tongue with a natural fluidity I had never experienced before. One of the most transformative experiences came when Sarah, my friend from the language exchange group, and I decided to start a weekly podcast dedicated to language learning. Our first recording session was a mixture of excitement and nerves. I remember sitting in a small recording studio in downtown New York, my heart pounding as I recounted the early struggles I faced as a non-native speaker. Every time I shared a personal anecdote about hesitating over a phrase or stumbling over an idiom, I could feel the support and understanding of my listeners, even if they were just a small online audience at first. The podcast quickly became a platform for sharing not only our tips and techniques, but also our genuine, unscripted experiences. The laughter over mispronounced words, the shared frustrations, and ultimately, the triumphs that came with each new breakthrough. Summer brought another turning point when I had the opportunity to travel abroad on an exchange program in London. The change of scenery was both exhilarating and intimidating. In London, the English language took on a new flavor. The accents were different, and the idioms sometimes baffled me. However, I saw this as the perfect chance to further test my skills. I spent my days wandering through historic neighborhoods, visiting bustling markets, and striking up conversations with locals. One afternoon, in a quaint cafe near Covent Garden, I met Edward, a local writer with a keen interest in the power of storytelling. He listened intently as I described my journey, and when I finished, he smiled and said, "Your command of English isn't just learned, it's lived. You've made it a part of who you are." His words were a validation of years of hard work and reminded me that every conversation, every interaction, was a stepping stone to becoming more fluent. Back in New York, I returned with a renewed passion and a wealth of new experiences. I began hosting workshops at my university and at community centers, where I shared practical methods for overcoming the fear of speaking. I explained how describing everyday routines in English, practicing self-talk, and even narrating my thoughts during long walks in Central Park had all contributed to making English second nature to me. In one memorable workshop, a young immigrant named Carlos approached me after the session. With eyes full of hope, he said, "Emma, you've shown me that making mistakes is just part of the journey. I want to speak like you someday." That moment not only strengthened my resolve, but also deepened my belief that language learning is about connection between people, between cultures, and between the past and the future. The challenges, of course, were never far behind. There were days when a tricky idiom or an unfamiliar cultural reference made me pause and question whether I would ever truly be at ease. I still occasionally caught myself thinking in Spanish when I was tired or overwhelmed. But with each of those moments, I learned to embrace the imperfection. I began to see each hesitation not as a failure, but as an opportunity to learn, to ask questions, and to discover more about the subtleties of English. My professors, classmates, and even strangers in casual conversations all played their part in this ongoing education, each interaction adding a layer of depth to my understanding. During one particularly challenging week, I was assigned a research paper on the influence of cultural idioms in modern American English. The assignment forced me to confront those very idioms that had once baffled me in lectures. I spent hours in the library, poring over articles and interviewing native speakers. In one interview, an elderly professor named Dr. Matthews explained the origins of several expressions with such passion that I felt the history and emotion behind each phrase. That conversation reminded me that language is a mosaic of personal stories, historical events, and shared human experiences. I incorporated these insights into my paper, and when I received an A, it felt like a personal triumph. Proof that my journey had not only transformed the way I spoke, but also how I understood the very fabric of English. As graduation approached, my world seemed to open up in ways I had never imagined. Offers for internships and part-time jobs poured in, many requiring confident, fluent English communication. I accepted a position at a dynamic marketing firm in the heart of New York City. My role involved presenting ideas in high-stakes meetings and collaborating with diverse teams. I recall the first board meeting vividly. Sitting among seasoned professionals, I felt both the weight of responsibility and the thrill of opportunity. The techniques that once helped me whisper hesitant sentences now empowered me to articulate bold, innovative ideas. I presented a project proposal that combined creative storytelling with data-driven insights, and as I spoke, I could sense that every practiced habit, from narrating my daily routines to recording my thoughts, had culminated in this very moment. Colleagues later approached me with genuine admiration, remarking on the natural flow of my speech and the clarity of my ideas. Yet, amidst all the professional successes and academic accolades, what resonated most deeply with me was the personal growth I had experienced. I began to see language as a bridge, a means to connect disparate parts of my identity. I no longer viewed my native Spanish and my acquired English as two separate entities, but as intertwined threads in the tapestry of my life. This integration not only enriched my communication, but also allowed me to embrace my multicultural background fully. I could now effortlessly switch between languages, using each where it best suited the context. And in doing so, I celebrated the unique blend of experiences that defined who I was. Every evening, as I sat by my apartment window overlooking the twinkling city lights, I would reflect on my journey. I thought back to the girl who once hesitated before speaking, the student who spent countless hours practicing self-talk, and the young woman who now stood confidently in front of audiences. The secret to thinking and speaking in English fluently had revealed itself to be less about achieving perfection and more about embracing the language with all its imperfections and nuances. It was a secret that lay in persistence, in the willingness to be vulnerable, and in the courage to share one's true self. Looking forward, I continue to nurture my love for English by exploring new facets of the language every day. I experiment with creative writing, dabble in poetry, and even plan to compile my experiences and lessons into a book, a guide for anyone who, like me, dreams of transcending language barriers to find their voice. In my heart, I know that this journey is far from over. Every conversation is a new chapter, every mistake a lesson in disguise. And as I navigate the vibrant landscape of my life in the United States, I remain ever grateful for the challenges that pushed me forward, the mentors who guided me, and the community of friends who celebrated each small victory alongside me. In the months that followed, my journey evolved into something even more profound and unexpected. Balancing my studies, my new responsibilities at work, and my growing role as a mentor, I found that the secret to thinking and speaking English fluently was continuously unfolding in ways I had never imagined. Every day, I discovered fresh challenges and small triumphs that deepened my love for the language and reshaped my identity. One crisp winter morning, as I was preparing for another busy day at the marketing firm in downtown New York, I received an invitation to speak at a regional educational seminar on language learning. The seminar, organized by a coalition of community centers across several states, aimed to inspire non-native speakers to embrace the language by sharing personal journeys. When I read the invitation, my heart pounded with both excitement and humility. I knew that this was a chance not only to share my techniques, the methods of describing everyday routines, thinking in real time, and absorbing English through every possible medium, but also to connect with others who were striving to break free from the barriers that once held me back. On the day of the seminar, I arrived early at a modest conference hall in upstate New York, where a warm crowd of educators, students, and community members gathered. I recognized several familiar faces. Sarah, who had been a steadfast friend since our language exchange days. Carlos, the young immigrant whose eyes had once sparkled with the hope of mastering English. And even Mr. Hernandez, whose gentle encouragement during our conversation circles had left an indelible mark on me. As I prepared my notes, I recalled every moment of my journey, the countless mornings of self-talk in front of the mirror, the nervous excitement before every public speaking engagement, and the quiet moments of reflection while gazing at the city lights from my apartment window. When I stepped onto the stage, I spoke with an authenticity that resonated throughout the hall. I recounted my early struggles, how I had once translated every thought from Spanish to English, how fear of making mistakes had stifled my ability to speak, and how, over time, I learned to let go of that fear. I explained that the process of embracing English was not about attaining perfection, but about building a bridge between my two worlds. My words flowed naturally, and as I described the transformative power of daily practices like narrating my routines and listening intently to American radio shows and podcasts, I could see nods of understanding and empathy in the audience. After my talk, the applause was both uplifting and affirming, a testament to the collective journey we all shared. Later that afternoon, during a break filled with animated conversations, I found myself engaged in a thoughtful discussion with Dr. Reynolds and Dr. Matthews, both experts in linguistics who had taken a keen interest in my story. Dr. Reynolds, with his characteristic warmth, remarked, "Emma, your journey is a vivid example of how our brains can be rewired through consistent practice and immersive experiences. You've turned every obstacle into a stepping stone." Dr. Matthews added, "Your insights remind us that language is not just a set of rules, but a living tapestry of culture, emotion, and personal history." Their words deepened my conviction that my struggles, my late-night self-rehearsals, and every small mistake had contributed to a larger narrative of growth. As the seasons changed, my life continued to flourish in unexpected ways. I began collaborating on a new project with Sarah, an expansion of our podcast that now featured guest speakers from all over the country. We interviewed teachers, students, and professionals who had each overcome their unique challenges with English. One particularly memorable episode featured Alex, a dedicated language teacher from Los Angeles, who shared innovative classroom techniques that complemented my own self-driven methods. We discussed the importance of not just learning English, but truly living it, of letting the language become part of one's thoughts, dreams, and daily actions. Even as I embraced these professional opportunities, I remained deeply connected to my roots. At home, over dinners with my parents, I would sometimes switch effortlessly between Spanish and English, relishing the rich, dual heritage that defined me. My mother often reminded me, "Emma, language is the soul of our identity. Your journey has shown us that embracing both parts of who you are makes you even stronger." Her words resonated deeply, reaffirming that my bilingual background was not a hindrance, but a source of immense strength and perspective. The evolution of my journey also inspired me to document my experiences in a more permanent form, a book that detailed the practical techniques and emotional milestones of my language journey. Late into many sleepless nights, I sat at my desk in my small New York apartment, pouring my heart into each page. I wrote about the initial fear of speaking, the long hours of self-practice, the breakthroughs at community centers, and the invaluable feedback from mentors and peers. Every story, every lesson, was a tribute to the idea that fluency is a continuous journey, a mosaic of moments that build upon one another. I hoped that this book would serve as a guide and a beacon for others who, like me, had once felt trapped by the fear of not being understood. One particular evening, as I reviewed a draft of a chapter detailing my internship experiences, I received a heartfelt message from a former workshop participant. Carlos, now more confident and steadily progressing in his own language journey, wrote, "Emma, your story has given me the courage to speak up in class and pursue my dreams without fear of judgment. Thank you for showing me that mistakes are just milestones on the road to success." Reading his words, I felt a profound sense of purpose. It was clear that my journey was not just about personal achievement. It was about inspiring others to believe in their own potential. As I look back on all these experiences, I realize that my journey toward English fluency is an ever-evolving process. It is marked by continuous learning, constant practice, and an unwavering commitment to personal growth. I am still that same student from New York, the girl who once hesitated to speak, yet now I see every conversation as an opportunity to connect, to share, and to grow further. The secret to thinking and speaking in English fluently, I have come to understand, lies not in the mastery of every word, but in the courage to embrace the language as a living part of one's identity. Now, as I stand on the threshold of new adventures, be it further academic pursuits, new professional challenges, or deeper personal explorations, I remain ever grateful for the journey that has transformed me. I continue to mentor, to write, and to speak, always mindful that every word spoken is a victory over fear, every conversation a step toward a more confident self.
Here are some comprehensive tips and tricks to help you train your brain to think and speak in English fluently. These methods are designed to gradually immerse you in the language, reduce reliance on translation, and build natural communication skills. Each tip comes with detailed explanations, examples, and practical advice to make the process as effective and enjoyable as possible. 1. Stop translating in your head. What it means. Rather than mentally translating your thoughts from your native language into English, try to think directly in English. Over time, this will reduce hesitation and allow for more spontaneous communication. How to practice. Describe your day. As soon as you wake up, start describing your actions in English. For example, say, "I am getting out of bed, brushing my teeth, and preparing for the day." Label your environment. Place sticky notes on everyday objects in your home with their English names. This constant visual cue reinforces direct associations. Mindful narration. While you're performing routine tasks, cooking, cleaning, commuting, consciously narrate what you're doing in English. Benefits: reduces mental lag caused by double translation, encourages faster response times in conversations, helps your brain build direct associations between objects, actions, and English words. 2. Immerse yourself in an English environment. What it means: surround yourself with as much English content as possible. This immersion isn't just about listening or reading, it's about engaging with the language actively. How to practice: media consumption. Watch TV shows, movies, and YouTube channels in English. Choose programs that interest you and vary in accent and vocabulary. Podcasts and audiobooks. Listen to podcasts or audiobooks during your commute, workout, or while doing chores. Pick topics you're passionate about to make learning enjoyable. Social media and blogs. Follow English-speaking influencers, join forums, or subscribe to newsletters in English. Benefits: helps you understand cultural nuances, idioms, and natural speech rhythms. Enhances listening skills by exposing you to different accents and speeds of speech. Provides context for vocabulary and common expressions used in daily life. 3. Practice self-talk. What it means: talk to yourself in English to create a habit of thinking and speaking without external pressure. This private practice is a safe space to experiment with words and sentence structures. How to practice: daily narration. As you go about your day, narrate your actions and thoughts. For example, I am feeling happy because I just had a great cup of coffee. Mirror exercises. Stand in front of a mirror and have a conversation with yourself. Discuss your plans for the day or review your experiences from earlier in the day. Reflective journaling. At the end of the day, verbally summarize your experiences in English before writing them down. Benefits: builds confidence by removing the fear of judgment, reinforces vocabulary and grammar through repetition, improves fluency as you become more comfortable with spontaneous speech. 4. Learn vocabulary in context. What it means: rather than memorizing isolated words, learn new vocabulary by seeing it used in natural contexts. This method helps you understand not just what a word means, but how and when to use it. How to practice: reading and note-taking. When reading books or articles, highlight unfamiliar words and note down the sentences they appear in. Usage examples. Create your own sentences using new words, making sure to incorporate them into your daily conversation. Story. Integration. Try to integrate new vocabulary into a short story or a personal narrative. This could be as simple as describing your day or creating a mini-fictional scenario. Benefits: enhances retention by associating words with meaningful contexts. Improves your ability to recall and use words naturally in conversation. Builds a richer, more versatile vocabulary that adapts to various situations. 5. Engage in active listening. What it means: active listening means not just hearing words, but truly understanding their meaning, intonation, and context. This is essential for mimicking natural speech patterns and developing an ear for fluent English. How to practice: shadowing. Listen to short segments of spoken English and try to repeat them exactly as you hear them. This exercise helps with pronunciation and rhythm. Note-taking. While watching or listening, jot down expressions, idioms, or phrases that stand out. Later, practice incorporating these into your conversations. Interactive listening. When in conversation, focus intently on the speaker, ask clarifying questions, and try to predict what might come next. Benefits. Improves comprehension and helps you pick up on subtleties like humor, sarcasm, or emotion. Aids in internalizing natural speech patterns and intonation. Enhances your ability to participate actively in discussions. 6. Speak regularly and without fear. What it means. Fluency grows with practice. The more you speak, the more comfortable you'll become, even if you make mistakes. The key is to speak frequently and treat every conversation as practice. How to practice. Language exchange groups. Join local or online groups where non-native speakers and native speakers meet to practice. Conversation partners. Find a language buddy who is also working on fluency. You can set regular times to chat about everyday topics. Public speaking. Engage in activities such as debate clubs, workshops, or community events. Even if you start with small groups, this will build your confidence. Benefits. Overcomes the anxiety of speaking incorrectly. Provides real-life feedback on pronunciation, vocabulary, and fluency. Encourages adaptive thinking as you learn to handle spontaneous conversation. 7. Record and review your speech. What it means. Recording yourself. Speaking can be a powerful tool for self-improvement. By listening to your recordings, you can identify areas for improvement in pronunciation, grammar, and fluency. How to practice. Daily recordings. Use your phone or computer to record short monologues about your day. Self-critique. Listen to your recordings and note any frequent errors or awkward phrasing. Track. Progress. Keep a journal of your recordings over weeks or months to see your improvement over time. Benefits. Helps you become more aware of your speech patterns. Provides a clear record of progress. Boosting motivation. Encourages self-correction and continuous refinement. 8. Write regularly in English. What it means. Writing in English forces you to organize your thoughts in the language, reinforcing grammar, vocabulary, and sentence structure. How to practice. Daily journal. Write about your day, your thoughts, or any interesting ideas in a journal. Blog or social media. Start a blog or share posts on social media in English. This not only practices writing, but can also invite feedback from others. Creative writing. Experiment with short stories or essays. This creative process can make learning fun and enhance your ability to express complex ideas. Benefits. Reinforces the grammar and vocabulary you learn through speaking and listening. Enhances your ability to structure ideas logically in English. Offers a tangible record of your language progress. 9. Embrace mistakes as learning opportunities. What it means. Everyone makes mistakes when learning a new language. Instead of fearing them, view mistakes as essential stepping stones in your learning journey. How to practice. Mindset. Shift. Adopt a positive attitude toward errors. Remind yourself that each mistake brings you one step closer to fluency. Feedback. Actively seek feedback from teachers, conversation partners, or language exchange groups. Reflect and learn. After a conversation or a speech, think about what went wrong and what you could do differently next time. Benefits. Reduces anxiety and builds confidence to speak more freely. Provides concrete learning moments that can be addressed and improved upon. Encourages a resilient and growth-oriented approach to language learning. 10. Utilize modern language learning tools. What it means. Technology can provide a wealth of resources to supplement your learning. There are many apps and online platforms designed to help you improve fluency through interactive methods. How to practice. Language apps. Use apps like Duolingo, Babbel, or Memrise to practice vocabulary and grammar daily. Online courses. Enroll in courses on platforms like Coursera or edX that focus on conversation and practical usage. Virtual reality and interactive platforms. Some innovative tools now use virtual reality to simulate immersive English environments where you can practice in real time. Benefits. Provides structured, gamified practice that can make learning more engaging. Offers immediate feedback and adaptive challenges tailored to your skill level. Supplements real-world practice with diverse and dynamic learning opportunities. 11. Join discussion groups and communities. What it means. Being part of a community that shares your language learning goals can provide both motivation and practical opportunities to practice. How to practice. Local meetups. Look for local language exchange meetups or cultural events in your area. Online forums. Participate in online communities like Reddit's R English Learning or language-specific Facebook groups. Workshops and seminars. Attend or even volunteer at events focused on language skills and public speaking. Benefits. Creates a supportive network where you can practice without fear of judgment. Offers a platform to share tips, experiences, and successes with like-minded learners. Provides diverse conversational contexts, from casual chats to structured debates. 13. Visualize and think in English. What it means. Train your mind to create images and scenarios directly in English. Instead of thinking in your native language and then translating, try to form your thoughts with English words immediately. How to practice. Mind movies. When planning your day or imagining a scenario, narrate the scene in English. For example, imagine a busy street and think, there are cars honking, people crossing the road, and street vendors selling food. Image associations. Use pictures or flashcards and practice describing what you see in English. This builds a direct connection between the visual stimulus and the language. Benefits. Reduces the delay caused by translation. Improves quick thinking in English, making your speech more natural and spontaneous. 14. Engage with English music and lyrics. What it means. Music can be a fun and effective way to internalize language rhythms, colloquial expressions, and pronunciation patterns. How to practice. Sing along. Choose English songs you enjoy and sing along. Focus on the lyrics and try to mimic the accent and intonation. Analyze lyrics. Look up the lyrics, read them, and understand the meaning behind them. Then, try to use similar expressions in your conversations. Benefits. Enhances your listening skills and natural flow of speech. Makes learning fun and memorable through repetition and melody. 15. Practice pronunciation with tongue twisters. What it means. Tongue twisters are a playful yet challenging way to improve your pronunciation, diction, and speech clarity. How to practice. Daily challenge. Set aside a few minutes every day to practice tongue twisters in English. For example, she sells seashells by the seashore can help train your mouth muscles. Record and compare. Record yourself while practicing and compare your pronunciation with a native speaker's version. Benefits. Sharpens your articulation and helps overcome common pronunciation challenges. Increases confidence when speaking quickly or in challenging conversational contexts. 16. Use spaced repetition systems, SRS. What it means. SRS tools help you learn and retain new vocabulary by reminding you to review words at increasing intervals. How to practice. Flashcard apps. Use apps like Anki or Quizlet to create digital flashcards with images and example sentences. Regular reviews. Dedicate time each day to review your flashcards. Gradually, the new words will stick and become a natural part of your vocabulary. Benefits. Reinforces vocabulary through scientifically proven review cycles. Builds long-term retention and recall, making it easier to think and speak naturally. 17. Role play and simulate. Real-life scenarios. What it means. Simulating everyday situations can help you practice using English in a context similar to real-life conversations.